That is a strong prediction, Dina. I love it. We are getting set for the games here. Obviously, 2.5 points clinches the best of four. And in the event of a tied match, we always have Armageddon to settle it. So, Dina, we are just about to start here, and all eyes are going to be on this match. It is the only one remaining.
The history is about to be made, ladies and gentlemen. This is the very first Chessable Masters qualifier, and we got the moves.
Let's go. All right, we have e4, e5. So the players are, honestly, not necessarily fighting for an esports World Cup spot. I'm sure that both of these players are going to be there, guaranteed at this point. But there's a lot on the line when these two match up. It's pride, it's prize money, and they're representing their esports orgs.
And for the first time ever, chess is gonna be a part of the esports World Cup. So yeah, that's a big thing for everybody, for all of us, even for you and me, Aman.
100%. Let's talk chess here. We have e4, e5. Now, looking very, very timid here to start off. Nothing too crazy. Hikaru had so many battles against Ali Reza and even Nepo. They kind of repeated that line where the white queen got over to a2. So it made me think when I saw this, is Magnus interested in playing some of those variations? It seems like not quite, and very, very reasonable start here. White goes for h3. Black retreating the bishop, getting out of the way of moves like b4, moves like d4. But I think we're going to see classic slow maneuvering. Knight from d2 can even go to f1 and g3. This is a very typical maneuver. And black might do the same. Knight e7 to g6, and then maybe pawn c6.
Yep, that's a very classic way of starting the game. In a way, boring, if I may. I'm pretty sure for Magnus it is looking boring, but he needs to be careful because this is, when you relax too much, this is where your opponent gets you. And yeah, I mean, the amount of games that has been played in this line is probably the same as the amount of stars in the galaxy.
Yeah, and even between these two players, they've played so much, but I was kind of thinking back that the last time they've really matched up has been almost more than a year ago in a serious event. They kind of traded wins in the Speed Chess Championship. I think 2022 Nakamura got the win, and then 2023 Carlsen got the win. So these are just the literal two best players in online chess.
Yep. And looking at this position here, we see b3, an interesting way of developing your bishop. From the other side, some fianchetto, or maybe just bishop on a3, preparing the pressure over this diagonal. But look at this bishop b5, pinning the knight and saying, I don't need your bishop.
Yeah, okay. Hikaru's kind of looking to the side, kind of processing the last couple moves. I thought they did look a little strange, particularly the move b3. Not really used to this move. The knight on d2 moving to f1, making way for the dark squared bishop to develop is a bit more standard. Bishop could go to e3, trade off for black's pretty powerful bishop aimed at white's king. But instead, we see b3. Now, you're right. It might be to get that bishop out, but interestingly, the move b3 could just be for bishop b2 and pawn to d4, just supporting the central advance there.
That would be the dream come true, having such a strong and big center with those pawns. And bishop d7, Hikaru is saying, all right, buddy, you don't want to trade? I'll find you anyway.
I'm looking at the move d4 here, but the square on b4 will always be available for that piece. So in case white does play d4 here, black could capture it, and then the b4 square would become sort of permanently available. And what an interesting way to develop the pieces here. Bishop d2 not going for the d4 push, but perhaps indicating, as you've shown there, that the b4 push is on his mind.
Yeah, and look at this. It's almost like a mind game here. I play b3 because I want to play bishop b2. Oh, no, I want to play bishop d2. You thought I wanted to play d4? No, b4 is on the way.
Yeah, I mean, look, the computer is having no problems with Hikaru's position at all. But I have to say that it's a bit of a mysterious way that Magnus has developed so far. Is Hikaru confused at all? Because he seems to be moving his bishops quite a bit here, right? The bishop went out to e6, and then it went back to d7 to match the move bishop b5. But then we saw the bishop on b6 getting kicked around. The knight went to c4. It moved up to c5. Then Magnus made another move. It goes back to a7. It's almost like just can't decide where to put those pieces safely. I still like his position, but interesting that he's kind of reacting.
Bishop takes c6, giving away the bishop in order to win a pawn, which is not a real pawn because of bishop f2. What is going on? I see Magnus Carlsen is trying to close the position.
Yeah, there's opposite bishops here as well. Bishops that are not operating on the same colors. Black has the light squared bishop, white has the dark squared bishop. It just means that, yeah, this already is reflected in the evaluation bar. Very, very even game. And I wonder why Magnus would be interested in trading in that pawn on the side of the board, the A pawn, for the F2 pawn. And of course, his king is a little bit out and exposed.
Yeah, and that's why he just played king g1, putting the king back where it belongs. I am slightly worried about a4. You think it's a cool pawn on the side, but it's not really a passable pawn. Right now, it's a backwards pawn. Okay, he's moving it. Very fair.
He heard you, I think. Yeah, he wanted to make sure that didn't end up as a weakness at all. I thought we might be getting the move d5 and maybe opening things up. But Hikaru playing a bit more cleverly. I think he's just rerouting some of his pieces. The knight on f6 truly, without a pawn break, wasn't doing that much. So I think
Yeah,
everyone's just rerouting.
and you think about knight c5, right? But if you
Mhm.
put the knight on c5 and then the bishop takes c5, then white could actually be with a better knight against the bishop because the position would be closed, and all those pawns would actually be restraining the bishop. So I'm not even sure that knight e7 is heading to c5. Maybe it's, as you said, just to play f6.
F6 could be F5 as well. I think that black is interested in some of these D5, F5 type of moves just to open things up. And we see captures on B5 followed by knight C5. D3 is clearly a hit here in this position. So bishop very likely to move. Bishop B4 looks like a standard reply. Bishop E3 kind of highlights that we need to keep an eye on that A5 pawn. Just because we moved it up from A4 might not be a weakness on A5 because of the bishop. It means you do need to leave the bishop there.
Yeah, very well spotted. We certainly do not want to blunder that a5 pawn. And I want to add that right now, looking at this b5 and a5, you clearly see a future pass pawn. So completely different situation from what we saw like 30 seconds ago. And it could become a serious headache for black.
Mm-hmm. Well, the game has kind of like settled down a little bit, right? The plans are clear here. Opposite bishops, there's that outside pass pawn for Magnus, so you can always appreciate that that's where white's going to try to play. I wonder if we'll see queen to b1 here, kind of a multi-purpose move. Also watching over the d3 pawn a little bit, and I've been sort of waiting and wondering about Hikaru's plan. He's definitely improving his pieces, but I wonder, is he going to strike with some move like d5 looks less likely now after that last move, or even the move f5, just always in the position.
Yeah, Hikaru certainly needs to create a counterattack, just something to play with, because otherwise he will be just waiting until the a pawn promotes.
Yeah, for the moment, it's the case where, okay, maybe he's not going for any of these breaks, but there's nothing wrong with his position. White's pieces also are a little bit, placed a little bit strange. Rook on a3, queen on b1, but there is some kind of coordination here. The a pawn also can't really move. Obviously, right now, if you move it, you lose it, but still, as soon as that pawn goes up one more square, it's too far in black's territory that it's so easy to attack and just win. So I think a5 is kind of as far as it can go right now, and I think we need to, for both sides here, Dina, use one of the rules that you've been talking about in the broadcast. Take one of your worst pieces and think about how to improve it.
So rook e8.
Yeah, I mean, rook a8 hasn't even moved, and it might actually be one of the better pieces in the position. It's not too poorly placed there. The bishop from e6 just went back to d7, which was rather odd. From white's position, I'm looking at the knight on f3, and I'm thinking, okay, it would be great maybe if that piece was on c4. Don't mind the knight on the c4 square. We'd be hitting b6, d6. Yeah, knight on d5 is another good one. So perhaps knight on f3 is the next piece that I would be thinking about, which means maybe bishop from d2. I might consider moving to e3. especially after this last move. And in order to do that, it means I need to defend my A pawn. Magnus says, no defending. I'm pushing. I'm surprised by this.
Yeah, I was just gonna say maybe it would be more potential for the passer in the end game, sort of joker that you can pull once the queens are off the board. But no, he's going for it. And I noticed that the evil bar wasn't as happy, but apparently there is nothing concrete.
Yeah, Magnus has definitely, calculated this reasonably. My first thought is that the pawn is a little bit too far because it's now outside of the range of the white bishop on d2. If it goes one more square up to a7, you could see how the dark squared bishop could go to e3 and provide very nice defense with the white rook also doubling on the a file and just hold on to that pawn forever. But that being said, Dina, I'm not sure that it can make it safely to a7. Black's going to play knight c5. Black's going to play queen c7. And wow, this looks like such an interesting decision.
And bishop b5, hitting the d3 pawn, stopping white from putting all their pieces on to help with the pawn. But why is it so bad?
I don't know. I'm looking at d4, right? That's the sort of first consideration, just because it's attacked, and this looks like the knight could recapture nicely. But there are lots of tactics and things to worry about. E4 might be loose at the end. Knight d3 can happen anyway. But a7 is quite defended, better than I thought. Maybe Hikaru's trying to play rook e7 next and just take on a7. It looks like white cannot add another defender. So if the engine likes white's position here, Dina, it's telling me there has to be kind of an important move here. We can't just play a slow move because rook e7 and maybe taking that pawn is coming.
Bishop e3. Magnus is hitting the knight with the idea if the knight moves, then the bishop would be protecting the pawn, but the knight certainly doesn't want to move. Hikaru's just going to go rook to e7.
So what happens if the pawn gets captured here? I guess, is it rook b1 almost? Yeah, you can go rook d1 and the knight will just return.
Knight to d3. Is that time to sacrifice the rook?
I mean, if I'm sacrificing, I need a pretty good reason. The thing about the move bishop e3 is it's one of those things where you just fully allow your opponent to play the move they threatened. And that's always a humbling experience in chess. When you make a threat against someone and they say, yeah, please do it, then all of a sudden you start really second guessing yourself.
And what if we would just put the rook on b1, attacking the bishop who's protecting the knight?
Yeah, rook b1, bishop c4, and then maybe rook c3. I wasn't sure about this position. Maybe we can kind of get a pin here, and yeah, the black queen can't really get out of this. It just feels like a position that tactically could fail.
Yep. And then the knight would come to d2 and attack the bishop.
And I think we have this on the board.
Correct.
I can't believe this. We were looking at this in analysis, and I was like, no, there's no way, because the rook would go to c3. Rook c3 looked like a good move, but Magnus maybe just played an even better one, knight d2. What does Hikaru do about this?
The bishop is attacked. The bishop is protecting the knight. It looks like just a simple overcharge. The tactic that the 1100s are usually studying days and nights.
Well, let's be serious here for a second, because the move knight d3 by Hikaru, I wonder what he overlooked here, right? A player as strong as Hikaru, he knows that Magnus is not just going to encourage him to take a pawn and not have anything for that, right? Like he's got to have something prepared. So I wonder what he missed here. He clearly overlooked something. Yes, the bishop is attacked. I think the threat is simply rook over to c3, and you can't do anything about moving that bishop because the knight still needs protection.
And looking at Hikaru's face, he's certainly not happy. He's realizing what's going on. He's nodding his head. He's he looks like it stinks. The position stinks.
Maybe pawn to d5? Like at this point, I'm just trying to save everything. I'm sure this move is no good. I'm trying to protect everything, but there's so many threats. The rook c3, and let's not forget, white has a pass pawn protected on a7. So even if we don't win a piece here, we can appreciate that in order to get out of this tangled mess that he's put himself in, he's not going to be able to also handle a pass pawn on the 7th rank.
And he's going low on time already. Only 1 minute for Hikaru Nakamura versus 4 minutes for Magnus Carlsen. Honestly, this looks just too good to be true.
Yeah, unfortunately, with no increment here, Hikaru feels that he has to spend the time because, I mean, he's shaking his head. He knows that the engine is obviously reflecting here, but his evaluation is going to be the exact same. There's probably not a way to save the piece without heavy material loss, and he's going to try d5. I mean, what else can you do? But I think he knows that there's just no saving all of these tangled pieces.
But you know, Aman, if we think about this position and f5 happened on the board, it's almost like taking the pawn on d3 wasn't the crucial mistake. It seemed like it was already a bad situation that you just needed to find any play.
Yep, definitely agree. Knight takes d3 was definitely the nail in the coffin, but it was trending towards a nice position for Magnus, and he basically correctly evaluated that this pawn on the a file would be strong. I can even say myself, I was looking at it and I thought, well, if it goes up into black's position, surely we'll just be able to win it. And as he defends the knight here, I think we know maybe he's going to try a queen g3 just to last ditch effort, but he lost the piece and he's got 27 seconds. This is unfortunately going to be Magnus's first win.
There is a cute little tactic, knight to f2, and if bishop takes f2, then rook takes. And it's not enough.
Well, I think that the a7 pawn is almost worth an entire rook, and Magnus is looking at 20 seconds for his opponent and thinking to himself, okay, why am I going to stress trying to find the absolute perfect defense? Let me just sack some material. I already won some, so it just doesn't matter. And he correctly evaluates that was the easiest path to victory. And Magnus Carlsen takes game number 1 in the grand finals against Hikaru Nakamura. And honestly, Hikaru going to be kicking himself. He's kind of words of encouragement to himself on the camera right there, as he knows that was not his best game, and he clearly, Dina, missed something in the calculations there.
But as a matter of fact, is he live on his own stream right now?
I believe that he does some commentary. I'm not sure he himself would be, but I believe he has a team covering almost all of his events. So yeah, I definitely expect there to be some coverage there.
Yeah, I was just gonna suggest to mic on, but then it would be an advantage in